It's November 16th, 2023. This is Roqe. Welcome to episode 297 of Roqe and Jian. Gomeshi, hello from Toronto. Hello from Canada. Salam Dustan Aziz Durud Bashama. Hope you are doing well wherever you are tuning in from around the world. A big show today with two feature guests. Golriz Ghahraman, Member of Parliament in New Zealand, will be joining me from Wellington, New Zealand in just a little bit. First up. And then later in the show, in the Roqe Studio, the Iranian-Canadian multi-instrumentalist Sina Bathaie, who has a brand new song and video out today. Mm-hmm. Coming out today, or out today, I guess already, or yesterday, depending on when you're listening to this, called Tehran. Cena will be in the Roqe Studio for a feature interview and to perform as well. Hello, Smart Pegah.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
You know this Golriz Ghahraman. Che baloi shode. I don't know if that's a bad thing to say. Is that a bad thing to say? I mean, in a good way.
In a good way, sure.
Wow, che baloi shode. No, she's very impressive. Mm-hmm. You know, she's a human rights lawyer.
Yes.
First of all, was a refugee from Iran. Mm-hmm. Went to New Zealand with her family when she was 9 years old.
Right.
Overcame, all of the typical migrant issues that we have, especially post-Islamic revolution. She came like right after the revolution or during it, around that time. Then, I guess she came in 1990 or so. She was born at the time of the revolution. Anyway, then overcomes other obstacles, becomes a human rights lawyer, travels the world, Oxford educated.
Wow.
Bebin? Tahsil karde, right? But then returns to, after stints in working in human rights law and issues and constitutional law and tribunals in different places of the world, including my beloved Cambodia, returns to New Zealand and now becomes a member of parliament and the first refugee or ex-refugee. Is there a best before date on being a refugee? You can't. Are you a refugee forever?
No, I guess not, because then she's a
citizen.
Yeah, right.
Well, she's in New Zealand. I'm not sure if she's Australian, but
right, New Zealand. Yes.
Yeah, they're not the same.
No, they're not.
And Persians are not
mistake.
Arabs. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
That one I know.
Yeah. So yes, she's in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. She's a New Zealander, a Kiwi. I don't think that's pejorative. I think that's okay.
I don't know.
Because they call themselves Kiwi.
That's true.
Yeah. But, oh boy.
we're digging a
it's getting
deeper
worse.
hole here.
Yeah. So this Australian, as you would call her.
Or Kiwi, as you would.
So she's, I think that's okay. I think that's okay. I think it's like Aussie. Oh, is that okay? Canuck.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I think it's okay. She's a member of parliament in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. She went viral. I mean, a lot of people would know about her, especially people who are in that part of the world. Right. And, she's been impressive. She did put out a book about 3 years ago called Know Your Place. It's kind of a coming of age story, but also the story about being a migrant and identity. And I've just finished reading this book and I find it very, very much resonated with me. It's as an immigrant, it just all of what she speaks to as the sense of displacement and not knowing where you fit in as a kid and all of that stuff totally relate to that. But I guess she's really become well known for many Iranians around the world in recent months over the last year during the uprising. And if you remember, in the summertime, there was that video of her that went viral because she was, I believe it was the Iranian ambassador in New Zealand. She was sort of taking him on at a tribunal.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember
and
that.
Everybody went, who's this amazing person who speaks incredibly? And that's her.
That is her.
The Australian wonder, they call her, despite the fact that she's from New Zealand. Yeah, and you know, she was very, very active during the uprising, and which was, you know, at its zenith, at its peak, this time last year.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
In fact, today, if I have this correctly, today is the anniversary of the death of little Kian Pirfalak.
Yes, it
so
is.
you know, I'm thinking about the shows we were doing this time last year, and that essay I did about Kian. It would have been right around this time.
Today, exactly. 1 year ago today is when he was killed during the nationwide protests and the uprising, like you mentioned. And, of course, Kian was the 9-year-old boy who was shot and killed by government forces in the city of Yazd.
Yes.
Actually, on that note, talking about Kian, you know, something that I read, there's been a lot of posts and a lot of messages shared to remember him, but one thing that caught my attention is that his family actually had to, I guess, grieve more in a week in advance of today because they were so concerned with, you know, just the increased pressure by security forces and police and things like that. So,
well, they've been hassled, eh?
They
like
have
it's been really, really hard. You know, like we hear from so many. The latest was Armita's parents.
Exactly.
You know, where you know they've been sort of gagged. You know, they can't speak out against the regime, and they can't, you know, without being somehow penalized or reprimanded or worse. It's really horrific. And Kian became kind of a symbol, one of the symbols of the uprising. Kian and his all of the world of possibilities for this kid who was into invention, and you could see the excitement in his eyes for the rest of it, what he was going to do in his lifetime, and then that identification with the rainbow.
I was just going to say, I can't even look at a rainbow anymore without thinking of Kian.
Little Kian Pirfalak. Well, I'm glad that we remember his name and we remember him. And again, Golriz Ghahraman was one of the people, you know, that this past year was so much about something we've been trying to do on Roqe for years, and it was really crystallized during the uprising, this connection that Iranians feel to each other around the world, united for a while, at least, in wanting to bring down this regime in Iran, and Golriz was a big part of that. Yeah. She's very active right now about the Middle East. I'll ask her about that as well. So MP Golriz Ghahraman joining us from Wellington, New Zealand, Pegah. New Zealand.
Yes.
Different country from Australia.
Very different.
Completely different country.
Totally got it.
She joins us in a little bit. And then later in the show, Sina Bathaie. Now, you know Cena.
Of course.
Do you know him personally? You probably
I don't know him personally, but I've gone to many of his shows. So
his shows, so it's interesting. You know, he comes from a santoor playing family.
Yes.
His dad was a kind of a santoor master. I think Cena, right? Australia. I think Cena is originally he's identified with Mashhad, but I think he's from Yazd.
Oh.
He's Yazdi.
Okay.
And he comes from this family of musicians, like a musical family. His dad played the santoor. He, at a young age, takes up these instruments, etc. Also becomes an engineer because
of
that's
course
what
you can't just be a musician, right?
He's a control engineer. I have to ask him what that means.
Okay. I don't know what that
manufacturing control? I don't know. Yeah.
Perhaps.
So it sounds ominous. It sounds like a Chinese dictatorship, you know, control engineer. But anyway, but I don't know. I'm
thinking of a Disney villain.
Yeah, Disney villain. Yeah, the control engineer. But he interestingly, if you know the music of like santoor music, tends to be quite sonati, classical, and so Cena graduates from that into wanting to do modern versions of it. Comes to Canada about 14 years ago in his early 20s and starts to work on different fusion music.
Right.
And now has come to this place where he's creating and performing this music that would be called kind of electronic. I don't actually know what it's called. It's like electronic dance, trance, you know, kind of music that involves classical instruments. Like he plays the ukulele. In fact, I saw that he has his ukulele here. I think he's going to play it later in the show over top of some new tracks that he's written. But he improvises with organic instruments over top of electronic sounds.
Right.
It's kind of and so the shows, as you would know since you've been to them,
yes,
it's less a concert and more kind of experience. I want to put this to him, but it feels like a hybrid of a concert where you go see a rock band play or something, and a DJ set where you sort of go more for the experience and the people you're with and the energy and the vibe rather than watching something on stage, right?
Yeah, they're incredible. I mean, like I said, I've been to numerous of his shows, and like you said, it is really about the experience. There's this fusion of the instruments themselves, the set that's being played, and then you have concepts of like the lighting and the vibe and all of that, and it's a great time.
And I have a feeling, and this bodes well for Sina's business life. By the way, this year, I've got to ask him about, I mean, maybe this will be the theme of the interview, but I certainly want to talk to him about it. He decided this year, I think it was February, the beginning of this past year, this year, to leave his job.
Oh.
Leave
Control
his
engineering no longer.
No more controlling. Poor guy. He's what do you call it? Electrical engineer.
Oh, so not a control engineer.
Well, no, it's something like electrical engineer is a control. Okay. You realize that 98% of the people who listen to Roqe are Iranian and thus
probably
engineers and are laughing at us right now because they know that an electrical engineer is a control engineer or whatever they're interested. I don't know what it is. Fuck.
Well,
I'll ask him.
Cena,
yes. So he decided to completely leave that career and focus entirely on his music. Wow. He's been traveling a bunch. He's doing gigs around North America, and But what I was going to say is that this is going to be good business for him, because I sense that Iranians, and I say this with no disparagement, I support different kinds of music, but I sense they like this kind of music, this kind of Buddha bar.
I don't know. You say that you're saying this with no, but the
I love Cena. I love Cena and what he does. No, but like you're less likely to see an Iranian.
I'm feeling a little judged right now.
I know. Well, because I know you like it, right?
Well, that's exactly.
I like going to the Cena show.
Yeah.
But like I just feel like if an Iranian, a 30-something Iranian is driving in a car, it's less likely that they're going to be blasting Aerosmith,
of course,
or or some jazz from the 1950s, or even hip hop, like maybe Hitchcast or something, but really no, not Jay-Z or something, and even not contemporary Western pop, but like deep dish. You get in the car and I am playing some club music. You like this?
Why is the accent coming out?
I don't know. They have an accent. These people.
I like how you said, I know you like this kind of thing. And then now there's an accent. And then it's like, these people.
No. All right, Jian. I'm otherizing Iranians that I'm. No, I do think that there's like I say, that's a go-to kind of musical style for a lot of quote unquote young Iranians. And because I don't know if it's 15-year-olds are listening to it, but people that I know, like in their 20s and 30s and 40s, like that's like their thing. They're into this kind of club sound.
As Jian stares at me.
I'm just saying, I think that there's a predilection for that. There's an appreciation. There's a supreme kind of desire for that kind of music in the Iranian community, and that's why it's good for Cena.
It is, but it's also not new. That's what I wanted to point out, is that this is not this like new phenomenon that all of a sudden in the last couple of years Iranians have really gotten into this. Because I knew we were going to kind of talk about this, I looked into this, and apparently since as early as the 60s, electronic music has been present inside Iran.
But there's lots of different kinds of electronic music.
Yes, but this whole concept of like house and deep house and techno
I am listening to a new song. It's so good. And they're like, oh, what new song? It's Buddha Bar number 3. Like it turns out it's like some compilation of just like droning on,
oh yeah, I like this stuff, and then uses words like droning on.
No, I kid. I'm having a go, but yeah. Anyway, and by the way, that's a Persian accent I'm doing. I'm making fun of myself, my people, my family members. I don't know. So yeah, you got my point.
I did indeed.
Thank you. No Aerosmith. Right. But I'm excited to have Sina Bathaie here.
Of course.
And I'm excited to have you here, Pegah.
Oh, thank you.
Always.
I'm going to make a mixtape of all of my house and deep house music
Buddha Bar
for
4.
you.
Buddha Bar 4. So we're going to have the roundtable next week again.
Yes.
But no more roundup today. We got 2 big guests.
Okay.
All right.
Let's do it.
We're coming to you on roqemedia.com. It's there that you can link to all of our platforms: Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, CastBox. If you like to see some visuals with Roqe, switch over to YouTube. If you like your Roqe descriptions and bulletins in English and in Persian, check us out on Telegram. Remember, you can support us and help us out with crowdfunding by going to our website, roqemedia.com, and pressing the Support Us button to keep us alive. Well, my first guest today is a distinguished Iranian-born politician and author in New Zealand, known for her remarkable achievement as the first ever refugee to become a member of parliament in that country. Golriz Ghahraman was born in Iran. Her family sought refuge in 1990 when she was just 9 years old. She pursued her education in human rights law at Oxford, later embarked on a legal career representing cases in New Zealand and various United Nations tribunals across Africa, The Hague, Cambodia. Her extensive work portfolio has included trials of leaders for genocide and war crimes, as well as efforts to rebuild communities in the aftermath of conflicts and human rights atrocities, with a special focus on empowering women involved in peace and justice initiatives. In 2021, Golriz added author to her list of accomplishments by publishing her first book, Know Your Place. Beyond her legal and literary pursuits, she has been an active advocate for human rights, particularly highlighting the violations occurring in Iran. And you may very well have seen her in the news during the uprising of the last year in Iran, supporting the cause of freedom and democracy. And right now, Golriz Ghahraman joins me from Wellington, New Zealand. Hello.
Hi. It's nice to speak.
It's very nice to have you on the show. It's a long time coming. We've been trying to get you as a guest. Thank you so much for doing this and making the time.
Oh, it's not a problem. It's a pleasure.
I have so much I'd love to ask you about. I want to get to your book, your identity as someone who migrated out of Iran but cannot kick her Iranianness. We can identify with that, your life journey, as well as some of the issues going on today. But if I may, as a general question to start, you're a human rights lawyer. That's what you did for a decade before you ran for parliament successfully in New Zealand. With that background, Golriz, how do you process what is going on in the world today, be it Israel and Gaza, Ukraine, Iran? It really feels like the world is on fire. That was the title of one of our shows that we did a couple weeks ago. The world is on fire. Is that actually the case? Or in your experience, are we just seeing all of that more now because of social media and our smartphones, so we think things are worse?
I certainly think things are worse when we look at Gaza. For sure, this is the most violent assault we've seen on that community. But I guess there's been cycles of this. So the focus of my work was always, and it's kind of funny because I come at it as a lawyer. It was really important to me to kind of say these things are enforceable. Because I think in Iran we see so much of our humanity kind of degraded without any recourse. So this is the one thing I really took from studying law in my Western homeland, is like, wow, you can go to court and you can hold anyone accountable for these things. So I keep looking at these atrocities in terms of those justice processes, but I think to some extent that loses the real underlying causes of these global events, which as Middle Easterners we know very well, which is that, there's inequality in the world. Our lives matter a little bit less. Our stories are never told unless we're in a war. Nobody's heard of Iranians as much in terms of the art we create, or we always celebrate Iranian scientists and poets, but the West, they don't know those stories. They don't see our kids having birthday parties or the fashion that teenagers are into. The same goes for Palestinians. They only see us in crisis. And I think whether it's writing the book or writing for Parliament, a little part of me just wanted to kind of have a different story from our part of the world be visible.
Right, right.
And maybe it would be harder for everyone to turn away when we're being tortured or killed.
Right, right. I find myself going back and forth on whether these are the worst of times, and I feel like, is this a product of getting older where I go, things just keep getting worse? Or are we just more aware of them? I mean, throughout human history, there's obviously been horrible things, the Crusades, the pogroms, the Holocaust, whatever that have happened. Yeah. But right now, it just feels like, oh my God, as you say, from Gaza to Ukraine, to what we went through with Iran over the last year. I mean, it does feel like the world is on fire, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, even if you look at Iran, when I was in Iran from the first sort of almost 10 years of my life, that was the first post-revolutionary decade. Things were so violent.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone that I knew anyway knew someone who'd been arrested or disappeared, or people would disappear because they would cross the border. It was so bad that you'd lose friends one way and it was all the time. The talk of the raids, the
executions,
yeah. Everything. And we had the war with Iraq. So then suddenly you're like, you need coupons to buy butter but no one knew about that. They saw Iran as this like fortress of Ayatollahs, and people who hated the West. So now things are becoming more. So in that respect, I think things may have gotten slightly better in Iran at some point. I was gone. But I remember looking at the pictures and being like, oh God, look at that. Look at them thriving. You just don't know. And then now we're seeing this incredible human rights movement become visible and make the crimes of the regime much more visible as well, which is breathtaking to me.
Let me start to get into where you fit into this, because while many of us feel helpless, you have carved out an amazing path to your great credit and talent as not only a human rights and constitutional lawyer, but also an MP now. You it seems, can do something about what's happening in the world. As we get into your story, you're this kid with a dad from Mashhad and a mom from Urmia who comes to Auckland as a refugee at 9. Does it surprise you how far you've come despite your relative youth?
Well, I'm 42.
That's young. That's young.
Yeah, no, it is young. It's certainly young for Parliament or any kind of political office, I think, unfortunately. Yeah, I guess it's surprising, but I think you also carry, it's not like I planned to be in Parliament. It's not like I had like this, plan, and I was political always. But I think we also carry with us, well, I think I certainly have felt it, this idea that you can't let opportunities be missed if you're the child of asylum seekers or refugees, or probably most migrants of color carry that with them. The loss of our parents' sort of potential to some extent, as sad as that sounds to say, in their lives, carries over to us. So I think it was more like one step at a time. It was like, of course I'm going to go to university. Of course I'm going to, push through and do something that was going to like help the world. And then like, oh, I have to go to Oxford. So it was more this, a less positive maybe motivation, but to kind of fulfill an obligation to the people left in Iran and to my parents to kind of go, yeah, you're going to use this freedom.
Good. I mean, good for you, and kudos to your parents in the sense that it doesn't necessarily follow that because you come somewhere as a refugee, you become an Oxford trained lawyer.
And you shouldn't feel that. Like, right. I'm not advocating that at all. People should feel free.
Right.
Because like everyone is, it's not a birthright to have this weird obligation hanging over us. People should feel just as good chilling out and enjoying their freedom. But yeah, I didn't.
I want to come back to what's going on in the world today and ask you a couple questions about it before we end off. But first, take me back. So you just talked about the fact that you were born in that first decade after in fact, you were born, you came with the Islamic Revolution, if you will. You were born right after it. Yeah, it occurred. And so your first decade of living, in fact, your time in Iran intersects with the 1980s, which were, by any measure, a very difficult time in Iran. You talk in your book about all the adults around you being in a state of shock. What do you most remember of Iran as a kid?
I think I mean, I have like very beautiful, warm memories of Iran as well, and you know, Nowruz and making shirinis with my grandma and all of that. You know, whether it's Urumia and the vineyards, or it's Mashhad with which is where I grew up, and all our friends were there. But I think there was definitely when I do think back, there is a very sort of clear, visceral memory of that shock and the stress that everyone around me, all the adults, were in. So they never stopped talking about but politics broadly, but like the revolution and what they intended. They were in the revolution, you know, they were trying to overthrow a dictator for more civil and political rights, and you know, bringing back the economy to, you know, all of these complex, really beautiful aims. And they were in genuine shock. And I keep using that word, but I think there was a generation of Iranians who felt like a little bit responsible, but also just didn't know what this machine was that was used against them, that had like stolen their revolution. You know, suddenly my mother having to sit at the back of the class at university. She went to university when I was little, you know, because they closed. And so, you know, her talking about what to do to resist that, and, you know, then at the same time knowing that people were being, you know, shalok, they were being beaten and imprisoned for showing their hair, that was completely alien to them. And I think that generation has never stopped talking about how that isn't their culture. That's so important to them to kind of document the fact that, you know, this Islamic regime is not our culture, because they felt responsible. So
and yet when you're born into that is your home. The dedication of your book is to your parents, in fact, and you basically state that they gave up everything for you and for a little girl to not be, as you say, raised in oppression. And yet you didn't actually want to leave Iran when you were 9. When did you realize, when does Golriz come into herself and know that you are actually grateful for the choice to migrate out of Iran?
I think like we were always aware as kids that leaving Iran was like somehow good, because people kept trying to leave. But it wasn't a dream of mine. And so I was kind of like, I was excited when we left, but I didn't realize that it meant never returning, you know? And so I never really contented with that part of it for a very long time. But I guess I realized I was grateful, probably, this is going to sound really weird, and I've never really thought about this, because I just got on with integrating into, you know, life. But I think when 9/11 hit, I was in my sort of first or second year of uni, and I had a very clear sense that, like, oh my God, this is gonna mean harm for the Middle East.
Yeah.
And just feeling like, oh, thank God we got out of there. But of course, as I was growing up, I knew that, like, I was grateful I didn't have to cover my hair, and I was grateful that I wasn't afraid of like this boogeyman posters coming for me. But you know, you don't process that. You're more dealing with the problems of your displacement. I think at that point, you know, you wish you were like everyone else. You know, you wish that your family was like everyone else's, because you're a kid. So I think my life at that point was more defined by the displacement rather than the freedom.
It's funny.
that it brought.
It's funny that your invoking of 9/11 reminds me. I haven't thought about this for a while. That when 9/11 happened, one of the first phone calls was, as one does, to my father, my late father now, but of course he was around then. And I remember the first thing my father said to me was, because in the hours after it was happening, we didn't know who did this, what was this, and he said, "Let's pray that they're not Iranian." Not that it would be okay.
The same.
Not that it was okay that they end up bombing Afghanistan and Iraq, but just that feeling of, oh my God, what is this going to mean? Did Iranians do this?
And we all thought the same thing. Isn't that horrifying? Because we were all also devastated for the victims.
Yeah.
But there was some part of us that knew that whoever in the Middle East was going to be, pinned for this, it would be like millions who would pay.
Yeah.
And you just not, but for some reason, like why? And so, you look at Gaza now, and you just know if you're a Middle Eastern that it's going to be easy for your people to be punished. And that's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, there's no one, no matter what side of the aisle they're on with the current Middle East conflict, that didn't know that the people in Gaza are going to pay after what happened on October 7th. You just in terms of your migration, you say that one of the things you'll always cherish about New Zealand is that you arrived there with nothing, and that didn't seem to matter. Explain what that means. What does that mean?
I guess it that kind of dawned on me as I moved through life that we did arrive there we were poor, like you're poor when you're a refugee, whether you were poor in your original home or not. You come with very little, and you have no contacts, and you have no way of sort of climbing that ladder, really. But there's a kind of a more or less classless society in the sense that certainly there's inequality in New Zealand, but the statuses that I think would have really hindered us in terms of whether if we'd gone to Britain, for example, or even the United States, I think we're not really there. It was an egalitarian society, more or less, that we moved into. And we moved into like a very working class, for lack of a better word, sort of area of Auckland and a melting pot area. So lots of South Asian and Pacific migrant communities. And so we kind of blended somehow. We didn't have sort of the titles that in Iran, everyone's like Doctor so-and-so and like engineer or whatever else. And like, that's not a thing in New Zealand. Just those little things like that.
Although your parents sound, you describe them as your little hipster parents. They sound pretty cool. Some of us had more traditional.
Cool. I think they were really cool.
I want to quote something about it so resonated with me about your immigrant experience. You speak so poignantly. This is in your book. You say, "Leaving my homeland as a child has suspended me between worlds. So it is near impossible for me to be fully Iranian. But the experience of having fled Iran is exactly why I will never be fully anything else either." Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I did this interview a while ago with my mom about the Women Life Freedom movement. And like at the end, the journalist sort of said, like, what do you want people to know about you? And you're like, because she was talking about us as in terms of our personal journey. And my mother was like, I want people to know the spirit of Iranian women. And this is, she started talking about herself and the movement is like being about Iranian women and herself as an Iranian woman. And it was really interesting to me because I had never thought of myself. I'd never thought that was my story. My story is about being a refugee. And it was really stunning to me. In fact, I was grateful that she was so far away from that. She doesn't define herself by her displacement at all. She's just an Iranian woman in New Zealand.
Right.
And but I connect, very naturally with other people who are sort of first generation or that 1.5 generation, you're the child of first generation migrants of color or refugees. And no matter where we're from, because somehow we have that suspension between cultures in common. I'm of course going to have a far better innate understanding of what's happening in Iran than another politician here. And so I've been able to sort of lead that work of capacity building New Zealand's government and parliament on trying to do something about Iran. But I don't feel like I own that in pretty much any part of that revolution. It's like, I'm going to lift your voices because I have some kind of understanding, but like it's really hard and almost embarrassing for me to kind of go to front something like that as an Iranian person, because I'm like, do I have a right to that identity?
Yes, I think so though, because that catharsis that Iranians were feeling around the world, inspired by these young people in Iran, particularly the young women in Iran, I think that comes from years of dealing with this, of this regime being there for 45 years and the collective trauma and all of that. And of course, you are very much a part of that. I wouldn't see you or even me separating ourselves from it. We still have family there. It's still part of our DNA. I mean, maybe you're absolutely right. I would never say that we can be the leaders of the revolution. They're on the streets in Iran, but to feel part of it, for sure, I would think. No.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think that's kind of that, but even the fact that we're having that conversation is part of that thing that will always be there for me, where I'm always negotiating my identity as being, how much of it is Iranian, how much of it is the experience of displacement, and how much of it is, as a New Zealander, because of course that's also very strongly there. And I am a representative of New Zealanders in the House of Reps, not of Iranians. But that lived experience is, is common in New Zealand too. So it's just forever going to be with us.
In terms of negotiating that identity, there is something very particular that a first generation, a second generation immigrant, the displacement that we feel, that I think I 100% agree that I mean, when we first came to Canada, my friends were a kid from Pakistan, a black kid who'd just come from the Caribbean, like they weren't even Iranians, but we all understood each other somehow, and yet as you grow, and particularly if you do okay in life, it almost feels like some people who haven't had that experience, or who've been, say, in Canada or New Zealand for generations, see the notion that of and not to even self-victimize ourselves, but to call ourselves have this feeling of being an outsider almost feels like a privileged position. They'll say something like, and I can imagine you would get this, where you self-identify to a certain extent as an outsider. That's what you call yourself. You have a chapter in your book called Outsider, and yet somebody could look at you and go, come on, you're a successful lawyer, you're an MP, you're doing great, can you really be an outsider? How do you respond if someone says that to you?
Yeah, well, our identities are very much sort of our own, but they're also projected upon us. So society, certainly Western society, never lets us forget as well that we're of a certain identity, and maybe that's not always a negative. But just the fact that we all know what it's like post 9/11 to go through an airport, or different types of migrants have very little issues getting visas for their families to come visit, whereas that isn't the same for Iranians. And certainly, by achieving certain levels of success, we proximate ourselves to whiteness, and it gives us privilege. But there's something always there. And I think for me, that was made very clear when I first even announced my candidacy. And the sort of fear I say that with empathy, but actually it was just hate that kind of bubbled to the surface, even
Really?
in New Zealand, but certainly in online spaces.
Based on you being Iranian?
Yeah, well, being from the so-called Muslim world, being a refugee, being from Iran, being, or they just saw my weird for them name, and
Wow.
so just as a nice cross section of xenophobia, Islamophobia. I'm not even, I don't identify as Muslim, but I would never. That's not an answer to what was bubbling up.
Right.
And just all of that kind of comes up. So it's not always easy to kind of say, oh, well, I'm fine now, I'm in here, because you still have to contend with the way that you're perceived.
Yeah, it's true.
And we still have a lot of work to do in our sort of Western homelands to get to a point where it's not our job to do that alone. But I'm
actually a little surprised that, I mean, you were first elected as an MP. It wasn't that long ago that in a place like New Zealand, which I tend to always think is something like Canada, that would even be tolerated for someone to be intolerant towards you. Because
yeah. I mean, it was to a point where when I did my maiden speech, which is your first speech in Parliament, and you get to kind of introduce yourself really, and set out your sort of hopes as an MP and your history. It was within the first couple of minutes of my maiden speech, I had to refer to it, where I had to go, I get threats of gun violence because of my identity, because I was at that point, I was delivering a maiden speech as the first ever refugee MP, so-called. And I had to really center that experience. And then 18 months later, we had the Christchurch mosque terror attacks.
Yeah.
So I was getting threats of gun violence because people thought, a Middle Easterner is like such a threat. And that people were shocked at that. But actually, it was so present that, 51 people were then killed. And they were all from different, very different backgrounds. But I've met Ilhan Omar, who was the first refugee to be elected into the US House of Representatives, and our experience is so identical and so funny.
Interesting.
And she's a practicing Muslim woman.
Yeah.
It's like...
and she definitely gets, she has her a fair number of detractors. In social media.
I'm literally the only MP who's had to have security at the level of like the PM.
Wow.
In New Zealand for that reason. When Jacinda Ardern was Prime Minister, I was, it was, which is so funny. As Iranians, we're like, we had to escape Islamists.
Right. Actually, I want to come. Actually, that's important, because I want to come back to that, and that's something that there are a number of Iranians right now, some prominent, contending with this, with it being called Islamophobic, depending on what their position is on the Middle East, etc. Just one other thing about when you talk about negotiating identity. Maybe not for you and I, or people who leave at a very young age, but for our parents, there's something that you said in your book that really, again, resonated with me, because I thought about my dad, and you talked about your dad. It's very similar to my dad, being very, very funny when you were in Iran, and when you moved to New Zealand, he somehow with the change of language and the change of geographic location and the change of job and status, and he loses his humor amongst the people who get to know him. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about experiencing that and seeing your dad necessarily having to shapeshift as he comes to a new place.
Yeah, that's I've read that bit of the book in readings. And yeah, it's always hard for me to like read it out loud. But I like to share that with audiences in New Zealand, because it kind of goes through both of my parents having to shift their identities, and watching that happen. In terms of my dad was, I think, the most painful for me. But I really want people to know, when they interact with migrants, that we have an identity outside of this person who's having trouble expressing themselves and is just, doing what you might think is a menial job or whatever. And I think that's what meant that, for my dad, he suddenly had to interact with the world in a way that, for some reason, something must have told him to kind of be in his gait and the way that he presents himself a little bit more subservient, a little quieter. He obviously, the language barrier, he can't tell jokes. Jokes are such an advanced part of language.
Yeah.
You have to be very proficient in the language to be able to tell and receive jokes, and so he lost that identity point of being like the center of attention in his friend group and like the witty, funny one that had us all doubled over. And it just meant that he was this quiet, a little bit hunched, sort of eyes down presence, there wasn't him in terms of what I remember of my childhood. And I think, children of migrant parents that do experience that. We kind of experience that unsettling.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, and especially really when your dad is the life of the party in Persian. And then, I mean, my dad was a little worse than yours in the sense that he didn't necessarily always stay quiet. He tried to do the jokes in English, and then people are just kind of like,
"That's so good.
We don't get it. What do you?"
I love that. Yeah. Just tell it. Yeah.
Wow.
It's their problem. It's their problem.
It's so hard interviewing someone like you for the first time because there's so much you've done. I don't know, I can't fit it all in. So I'm gonna bypass years of your life where you travel around the world and you attend these human rights tribunals and you work as an international lawyer. I did want to ask you though, in a general sense, about one place in particular and a takeaway, if you will. One of my favorite places in the world is Cambodia, and you oversaw an international tribunal overseeing human rights atrocities in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. What did you most learn? What's a takeaway that you can share with us from an experience like that, which is an extraordinary one, to go to a place like Cambodia and to really get into the minutiae of what happened there, a place that did where genocide did occur. What did you most learn about the world and that kind of a situation?
Yeah, it is a very humbling experience, and I'd come to it, I say I came into human rights law or whatever because of the sense of, I need to try and help right some of these wrongs or whatever, but I think still coming at it from, the angle of a United Nations justice institution it's quite a Western, and not just Western, but like a sort of a first world approach where you're like, we're going to have these trials, and that will deliver justice. And I still I do believe in the international justice system in the sense that it individualizes blame, so you don't have these cycles of like different ethnic groups blaming each other and the conflict continues. It brings kind of some transparency, a formal record. It has its place. But I think the thing that you kind of learn the most, and this is documented in various atrocity trials, is that like the victims are not restored by a process like that. The victims actually want to move forward. So what they really need is things like, of course, an acknowledgement, but most of the victims in Cambodia were elderly and they'd lost family members, so they didn't have anyone to care for them. So they actually were like, anytime we moved around to try and explain what the trials were about, they were like, we actually need old people homes. We actually need care. We need, maybe we need some therapy. We need, like, these are the types of things people were asking for. They wanted to be restored with dignity. Yeah. Rather than, and when I see people kind of debating at Gaza now, like, is it a genocide? Is it war crimes? And I'm kind of like, we need to stop the hurt. Like, there's little kids, like, can we all just agree that like little kids shouldn't fear being killed at school or in a hospital? Can we, and that's what you kind of learn is like, actually, these answers are pretty simple. Everyone's just looking for security, dignity, to be kind of with their families. And the time to intervene is when the suffering is happening. Like, let's not wait another 40 years.
It's certainly not an academic question for Iranians too when it comes to Iran, because one of the things that for all the inspiration of the uprising of the last year and women, life, freedom, that there was this underlying sort of question of, well, if there is change in Iran, then what? And even if it's successful change, what do we do with the 1 million people who are connected to this regime through Sepah, et cetera? What kind of tribunal? How do you address that? And you in your book, I mean, you do have an interesting position on this. You just said it earlier in the interview that, we wanted to get rid of a dictator. You said, you say that the 1979 revolution was about democracy and that the revolutionaries were successful in bringing regime change, that you say magical at one point, that it was magical. It ends up getting hijacked by Khomeini and the Islamic formalists. But Golriz, that many people now see the revolution of 79 as a mistake.
It totally, I mean, obviously it was, but only because of the way that it was allowed to be hijacked. So I think having a revolution to overthrow the Shah is one thing, but then having a commitment to democracy is what would define that revolution as successful and right, righteous. But overthrowing the Shah and executing people summarily and stealing the wealth that might have been stolen is not a righteous revolution. But I think that the intention of many revolutionaries was certainly, it was incredible that they rose up for sort of equality.
Oh, and to the people who would say now, we're obviously bifurcated, we're obviously balkanized, we always have all these different opposition groups. We proved that we couldn't necessarily entirely be unified, at least in the diaspora. Who knows what happens after a revolution? Maybe it gets even worse, and you sort of go, well, what's worse? And they go, the Taliban. What is your response to that in terms of change for Iran?
Well, change from Iran, to me, first and foremost, has to come from Iranians in Iran. Like, they are the most impacted community, and they have shown again and again that they have the courage, but also, the smarts. I think it's really, it's bizarre to me that the diaspora community thinks that we might know best who should lead these incredible millions upon millions of people in Iran who have already, risen up in very sophisticated ways, in different ways, whether it's as human rights lawyers, as young revolutionaries, as activists. They have different groups, there are rainbow activists and there are different minority communities rising up for their own rights. We definitely have a part in this as Iranians outside of Iran, but that has to surely be to support and lift those voices and hold our governments to account, because our governments are definitely supporting the regime in one way or another. So it just blows my mind that there are people outside of Iran sitting around kind of trying to decide who's going to lead that nation after the revolution. Like, that is not democracy. And democracy is the only answer.
It's not democracy. It's I would go further and say it's outrageous. But on the other hand, just a little flag that you could wave and go, but part of the problem with 79 was there was no roadmap, right? So I do have a little iota of sympathy for those going, look, if we go into this with no plan, then what, right? Then
there has to be a plan, but I think the plan is like a process, having a process in mind. And in 79 there was a prominent charismatic leader from outside Iran. Right. And that was the problem. Right. So actually, it can't be about some person, I won't say some guy because maybe we can,
Yeah.
it can't be about one person and that's predestined to lead Iran no matter what. And even if it were, then that has to come from Iran, from Iranians inside Iran. We just really have to trust them in terms of they've proven themselves to be sophisticated revolutionaries.
Yes.
But the process for sure, we have to know, like we have to say, will there be a justice process? Will there be a truth commission? We have to agree that we won't, be taking people out back and shooting them despite the level of anger, because that's not setting out a human rights-based system for the next round. We have to agree on how and when an election would be held. But those are procedural issues, and they calm people and kind of strengthen the social contract to go on. But whoever leads, it will be Iranians inside Iran.
Let me just do a disclaimer for your sake. Your intimation that Khomeini was charismatic was not an endorsement.
God, no.
people get very
randomly. Yeah.
There's so much anger that they get sensitive. Iranians like, how dare you call him? Well, he was charismatic.
I think I'm joking, if you know what I mean. Like, why did they keep saying he was this charismatic leader? Because we've all seen that video where he lands and they're like, how do you feel? And he's like, nothing.
Yes, no, there was something about him though. And I think he was for
some reason, he was seen as, but that's so dangerous. You can't have a revolution around one guy.
No. But I mean, think about it. He was in terms of the however misled, the notion of we're getting rid of opulence, dictatorship that comes from a monarchy, all of that. He was the anti version of that. Is the closest you could come to saying that's where the charisma was. But
and you can see, I mean, there's been examples, like it's not unheard of. We've had the fall of the British Raj in India, followed by, I know India is troubled right this minute, but followed by a democracy that more or less worked.
Followed by the country being divided into two countries.
The country was divided, but they kind of came through it without an Islamic theocracy. Well, okay,
yes,
yeah. Like we did, but we've had South Africa that has come through. There's different versions of that we can learn from. There's South American nations have come through fascism, and and there is Rwanda and the former Yugoslavic nations, and like there is different levels of success. There is fallouts, and we can learn from that. There's now books on all of those post oppressive regime solutions.
Yeah. And there's a spectre. What's his name? The Fatih. What's the great? We've had on a couple of times. Fatih Ali Moghadam. Yeah, there's a great Fatih Ali Moghadam is I don't know if you know who he is. He was he's an academic, but he writes about democracy, and he was on this Netflix series called How to Become a Tyrant. He's just he's brilliant. He's been on our show. And he talks about that there's no pure democracy anywhere in the world, but there's gradations of places that are closer to it than others, but that we can't sort of look at the beacon of, Canada or something and go, this is a democracy, because it clearly isn't. And particularly, this past year, this uprising, you talked a bit about with respect to your mom and the way it affected you. You cut your hair in solidarity at a demo in New Zealand after the killing of Mahsa Amini. Tell me a bit about how that event and the uprising after it affected you personally.
So we have a very small, comparatively, it's small diaspora Iranian community in New Zealand. Obviously, we're a very far away, small island nation. And so the community had never really come together in the way that we've now seen it come together for the women life freedom movement. And I think, there's all of the kind of issues that different Iranian communities have in different parts of the world, where when we first moved here, there was a real suspicion among Iranians where it was like, who's connected to the regime? Are they spying on us? All of this kind of thing that you can't ever explain to anyone, but it kind of existed to divide us. And then younger people started coming as students, and they're awesome, to be honest. I wish they were around when I was young, but they don't relate to the people that have been here for the longer. But so we'd been a disparate community, and then suddenly it was just this absolute lightning force where Iranians could come together around this. And we saw, I mean, I go to protests a lot as an MP, and I, support the Palestine movement. I support trade unions. I support, there's all sorts of human rights atrocities that happen with communities here. I've never seen the level of emotion. It was like, I mean, everyone at these demonstrations that we held was overtly, bringing their own trauma. It was, I mean, cathartic in a way, but it was very confronting for me as an Iranian person who's kind of, I feel like I'd processed that and it was to one side, and then to have all of those emotions come up again. I haven't seen my family ever again. People have passed away. I remember the violence too. And so to be surrounded by people who are like, we're angry. There was so much anger. So that was the first protest. Was I flew to Wellington from Auckland, where I live, and to support that. It was important to me. And then we cut our hair, and I was literally leaving that protest and flying within an hour to the protest in Auckland, and then I cut my hair again. So it's only just recovering. Right. And then we just kept holding these, and they kept growing. And I think one of the most moving things was when we started going to the embassy in Wellington, and knowing the ambassador and his staff were like inside, and just people just coming out with whatever they felt like. And we had New Zealand police, just necessarily one car was there. And they told us, they said he's just calling police incessantly with noise complaints.
But that's a perfect segue, actually, because a lot of places in the world, including where we live here in Canada, there's no Iranian embassy. In early August of this year, just 3 or 4 months ago, you went viral for this clip of you grilling the Iranian ambassador for New Zealand by saying the Iranian regime is committing crimes against humanity. It was a real moment, and for people who may not have known you before outside of New Zealand, I think many certainly Iranians around the world got to know you and were impressed by that moment. Can you share the kind of reactions that you received for that moment from around the world?
Yeah, I don't think I was expecting the reaction or the response that clip got. It's actually an hour long. The whole committee meeting was filmed, so it's quite, they always are. But, there was cut clips of that particular moment. I was very clear in my mind. I'd worked for a while to try and get that guy in front of the committee. And I was very clear that the purpose of it would just be to have some more news coverage of what's happening in Iran, because it had died down. So I had called media to come and cover it. And that's why I had the printed pictures of Mahsa Amini and others, because I knew that there was a visual element to this that that the reporters would need. And isn't it weird that you have to think that way? But it was about getting their names and what was happening in Iran back in the spotlight. So I never thought that there would be like that piece of the exchange when I was challenging the ambassador. I can't even remember his name. Would be the central thing, but I wanted, there was a picture of Tumaj, there was Masa, and but it ended up being in the room. So there was a lot of reporters, and there was some parliamentary staff that had come to watch the session. And I think the response that will stay with me is more the response from in the room that you can't really see in the clip. But after he left, like, people just absolutely lost. Like, we had staff members that had to go and have 2 hours out. And reporters who kind of came to me and were like, I don't know how to report this. I'm in shock.
Wow.
And it's because, and to us, it's that's of course you're going to put a picture of this young woman that's been murdered in front of that ambassador. Like, to me, it's just, but for them, it was hearing him in response to that, also just riling out like the propaganda messages,
right.
And to like be like, no, this is happening in the real world. So it's our reality as Iranians, though.
Yeah, it was a very, very powerful moment, and it was a very I think a proud moment for a lot of people seeing you. You know, we all want to. There aren't a lot of opportunities because the regime is so coated in this, you know, sort of iron castle, you know, inside Iran, that we don't see a lot of those kind of opportunities where somebody actually takes on the you know, one of the members of directly related to the regime. And the only time we see it is when there's a Western journalist interviewing Abdullahian, and you know, it can be excruciating because you want them to ask certain questions that don't get asked, and they give the guy a platform and stuff. And so let me use that as a segue before I let you go to ask you a couple final questions with respect to what is happening in the world. And I'm actually grateful to get this opportunity with you because you've been an outspoken supporter of Palestine. You call for a free Palestine. You don't make any bones about that. There are a lot of people of Iranian descent around the world who have sympathy or empathy about the devastation in Gaza right now. With that said, this is what I want to. I've been talking about this on the show, and we've had different people talking about this. At the same time, as you know, there are people very angry at the Islamic Republic regime, Iranians especially, and the sponsorship of Hamas or Hezbollah, and when the attack on Israel happens, and there's these mullahs cheering it on, there's revulsion at that. How do we square sympathy, support for Free Palestine with members of the regime parroting those kind of lines as if that's something that they care about, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I have a lot of discomfort around this issue, of course. It breaks my heart that Iranians have experienced so much trauma under that regime that now we're seeing people find it hard to sympathize with Gazans that are being literally just slaughtered. I get that it comes from trauma, but it's like losing our humanity in that way is another way that we're giving something to the regime. I think that's how I would look at it. It's absolute propaganda that the Islamic regime in Iran would ever care about ordinary Palestinians. They do fund Hamas, but you know, do we think that the 2 million people of Gaza want to live under a Hamas-ruled, ruined little city with no democracy? Do they want to be defined by young Islamist men, you know, any more than Iranians want to have that regime be the face of us outside of Iran? And actually there was a letter that came out from Palestine in support of the Women Life Freedom movement that made that point, that I shared on social media a while ago. Maybe I should share it again, actually, that ended by saying, we know that the Islamic regime is using us.
Yeah. I feel like the people in Gaza probably have a much better sense of things and the nuances and what's going on than my one of the things I've talked about. My concern is, and what I would put to you is the well-meaning. Let's forget about somebody who's just sort of, you know, enjoying the sport of activism or something. But the well-meaning Western activist, maybe a young person on a campus in America who wants to, you know, who's taking up the cause of the Palestinians, heartfelt, and who hears Abdullahian on CNN and goes, oh, this guy's our ally. You know, that's my concern, right?
Well, it's like when George Bush was bombing Iraq and Afghanistan and Ahmadinejad was standing up to him and everyone started
right.
supporting that guy.
Yeah.
Like, he's torturing his own people, guys. So yes, Western leftists need to learn that you can be against more than one guy at a time. Absolutely. But yeah, that's what that reminds me of. It's like totally you can be against this regime and also see that Israel is committing ethnic cleansing. And you can also see that there are Israelis and Jewish communities all around the world protesting that too. So none of these regimes need to define their people. And certainly we don't need to lose our humanity and give in to that prejudice. Like, we absolutely have to condemn the deaths of Israeli kids and any civilian anywhere at the same time as we condemn what's happening in Gaza. And condemn the Islamic regime, because
there's a lot of condemning that has to happen.
Yeah. Well, like, that regime doesn't care about Muslims.
Right.
Are you kidding?
Well,
Most Iranians do define themselves as Muslims. They're not.
Yeah, and you know, in much the same way, I don't know. I also feel like when you know, that some of the sympathy that Iranians feel or connection they feel with Israel is because this regime has used every opportunity for 45 years to attack Israel. So the enemy of my enemy must be that, you know, there are so many nuances to this that put Iranians in a very strange place. I mean, I would say that if you give into that, then the regime wins. Like, we have to hold on to our humanity and actually, instead of condemning, like, let's leave aside all the condemning that I do. We have to stand for people, you know, and anyone who's the victim of violence is validly, deserving of protection. And you know, those regimes don't get to define who we stand with and what our humanity means. And you are the human rights lawyer. I appreciate you bringing that perspective. It is such it's a great pleasure to get to talk to you. I really appreciate the perspective. Maybe as a final question, your mom told you that you were going to be prime minister when you were a little girl. Will you be?
No. No, I honestly, I wouldn't want that job. It's a lot. I do prefer to be able to focus on human rights issues and be as outspoken as I have been able to be, you know, whether it's electoral reform here in New Zealand or the justice system here in New Zealand or some of these international issues. You don't get to speak as freely as prime minister. But I think my mum was, you know, maybe making a point. God, Iranian women are so ambitious, aren't they?
Well, she's got to be extremely proud. I don't know if she's still holding you to becoming prime minister, but no doubt she's feeling pretty good about her daughter at this point.
Hopefully. She's not particularly demonstrative, you know, Iranian parents.
You're wearing that for the interview?
Yeah, exactly.
Mom. Golriz Ghahraman, thank you so much. Much appreciated. And we'll be watching you from afar. And hopefully, if you get to visit Canada sometime, we get to see you in person as well. Thank you again.
I'll come visit.
Please do.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Anytime.
Bye-bye. Merci.
Merci.
This is Roqe episode 297, and my next guest has walked into the Roqe Studio. He is an Iranian-Canadian multi-instrumentalist who is increasingly becoming a must-see for a live electronic improvisational dance and trance experience. Take a listen to this. you go. Little taste of the brand new track entitled Tehran that has just been released today with a beautiful new video. And it is the musical work of my next guest here in the Roqe Studio, Sina Bathaie. Sina is a Toronto-based multi-instrumentalist and composer. He was born in Yazd, grew up in Iran in a musical family, including his dad, a well-known santur master named Yazd Bathaie. Sina started playing music at a very young age, but also, of course, got his engineering degree in Iran before moving to Canada in 2009. At the age of 23, his academic pursuits led him to the Berklee College of Music, where he studied composing and orchestrating for film and TV. And along the line, Sina has increasingly carved out a unique path as a modern, classical, Iranian-tinged instrumentalist and electronic musician with concerts at festivals and venues across North America. Sina's discography includes his debut record Sound of Silence, which came out in 2012, and his album Ray of Hope, which came out in 2017. Most recently, this year, Sina has made the big move to quit his engineering gig and focus entirely on music. He has a big show in Toronto next week that is a fusion with the Van Gogh art experience. We will get to that, but first, Sina Bathaie joins me in the Roqe Studio. Hello, sir.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Long time coming. We finally got you here. It's really nice to have you here.
That's true.
Congrats on your new baby, the song and video for Tehran. How does it feel on release day?
Oh, it's very exciting. Release days are always the best because it takes a long time to just work on the songs and just plan it. And this one also, Tehran, was I made it 2 years ago, so it was a long process and then you wait for the right time to release it, and then when everything is sorted out and when it's out there, it's just nice to watch and see how it goes.
What inspired you to name this piece after the capital of Iran?
So there are two ways of making music. One way is that normally you think about the subject and make music, but I'm not that kind of person. So normally I make music and then I think, so how does it feel like? Partly
because you're not writing lyrics most of the time, right? It's instrumental, so you're coming up with the music and then thinking of the concept after.
Absolutely. I was thinking if there was a lyric, it would be way easier to name the song and just go after it.
Right.
But this song, it felt like a Tehran because it has this different vibes. It was just with the chaotic energy of Tehran, the ups and downs. So the flow of it sounds like really. It's a Tehran.
Are you? I was actually curious because having done a little research on you, it's difficult. I never asked you this. I mean, you're born in Yazd, right?
Yes.
But you're identified with Mashhad, but you spent time in Tehran. I mean, you're like this pan-Iranian guy. Where was home?
Well, I was born in Yazd, and I was living in Tehran for a few years, and then lived in Mashhad for a few years too. But most of my teenage years was in Yazd, and then I went to school in Tehran. So it was all of them.
So where do you consider home?
Yazd was where I was born. Yes.
That's the go-to.
Yes.
Do you have a song called Yazd?
I was actually thinking that I have to
Tehran
make a song.
Gets the song and not Yazd?
I love Yazd, and I want to make a song called Yazd. My record label is Windcatcher Records, so it's Windcatcher, that Badgir, that Windcatcher is a sign of the Yazd, but I love that, but I'll make a song called.
What are this is where I'm naive sometimes about, what are the Yazdis known for? If every place the Rashti people, the Shirazi people, what are the Yazdis known for?
Yazd is a very ancient and beautiful city. It's very quiet, and but it's known for its wind catchers, the signature of the city. These huge wind catchers that are catching the wind to make the house cool. So that's one of the signature of the city.
You are beautiful, maybe not ancient yet, like Yazd, but you have the beauty of Yazd in you, it seems, with your music. I should mention Sabah Zamani is also on that track. We're big fans of her. She's been on the show a couple times. You guys are increasingly working together. Yes, she's the voice we hear there.
That's correct. On that track, I collaborated with her because she has a really lovely voice, and at some point during the production, I felt like, there could be some vocal on that track, and for me it was important that the vocal can actually add some beautiful message, a positive message. That's where I'm going with my music. And Saba was here in Toronto, and I was like, Saba, let's make history together. I call her, and she came and joined me and sang this one. And
It's interesting because I think of her, anybody who's familiar with her and has seen her perform, and even here in the studio we did a little jam and she sang, she's quite improvisational. I mean, she's anything but structured. And your whole thing is improvisation. So the two of you together, it's like wild jazz cats of the 1950s doing freestyle, right? I mean, there's no rules.
absolutely, that's correct. She's such a great improviser, and when we perform together, it's just we are having fun and improvising together.
Is it fair to say when you do there's no two shows alike for you, that you basically when people come see you they'll recognize some of the tracks and some of the melodies, but basically you're improvising on stage?
That is correct. That's how I like every show to be, and also every show, in my opinion, should be different. I like it to be different songs, and it should be different experience for people to come and get out of the
But
show.
there's no safety net in that then, right? You I mean, you don't have sort of go-to hits that you can play. If you're committed to improvising and every show is different, what if it doesn't go well?
Well, my go-to song is also a curation of the improvisation. So actually, when I play my go-to song, I'm always improvising. So I have to improvise because that's how that song works. I can't really follow something. So
Right.
my hit songs, if I want to play that one, I have to improvise.
So which song is that?
Breath of Life.
Breath of Life, yeah.
Yeah.
And so are there moments where, but be honest now, Roqe,
Yeah.
on stage, are there moments where you're playing, say, a riff on one of your instruments, on your ukulele, on one of your guitar type instruments, and you know that you can, there's a riff and there's a place where your fingers are going to go that you've done before, and you know it would be easier to do that rather than trying something new. Do you sometimes rely on places your fingers have gone before?
Yeah.
So it's
of
not
course.
entirely improvisation.
That's true, because it's the form, the whole thing. I know where I want to go in general. So it's not a one notes that I will hit. I know there's a form. That's how I wanted it to be from the beginning. I wanted to make a platform that I can just flow with it, but I know where I'm going, like where I should go and how should I come back.
It's pretty much, I mean, I certainly feel this way, and I'm sure musicians listening, it's kind of the dream to have a bed that you can just play on top of, and I mean, by bed I mean a musical sort of track that you've created, and then have fun, right? You're keeping the fun alive in terms of what you're doing, but there are a lot of musicians or a lot of people who want to rely on the safety of what they know and not stretch out for fear that of where it might go.
But well, I'm an improviser. I mean, like, that's where I'm good at, and I know that would be, if I want to stick to something that just be that my safety net, it's the improvisation part. So if I can,
Improvisation is your calm zone, is your safety
true.
zone. That's
Yeah.
so interesting.
Yeah. So I'm from the other side. I like to improvise.
Cena, the story is you were born into this musical family I mentioned in the introduction. As a matter of fact, I've seen you in concert with your dad playing the santur and you and your brother playing alongside him. This is like a super musical experience. It's like the Von Trapp family or something. Were you always, is it fair to say you were surrounded by music as a kid?
Absolutely. I'm very lucky that I was surrounded by music since I was born.
So was it always obvious that you were going to play music? Was it almost mandated? Was your father like, okay, come on, guys, everybody's picking up the santur?
Actually, it was actually opposite, because my father never pushed us to play. So we actually, we went to play santur because it was fun. And, I never actually went to class to learn from him. It was just whenever I felt like, I was just actually listening a lot of things because he had a lot of students. So I knew all the songs. So it was never a force. So we always loved to actually go and play and just showcase it to friends.
And it's interesting as well that you didn't rebel. You didn't sort of say, I'm not going to be like my dad. You actually happily followed in his footsteps to a certain extent.
That's true. I think the reason was that there was no force. I know that there are a lot of people who are masters, but their kids, they just don't want to play. Basically, maybe there's expectation, or it wasn't like that for me.
The santur is a sonati is a classical instrument. I think of classical music as being quite structured. Maybe I'm imposing some sort of Western idea of what classical music is, but even in terms of the Persian classical music I've heard, it seems that you would have needed to buck that trend to grow out of that to be an improviser. Did you improvise as a kid, or did that come later?
I improvised. I made my first song when I was 10 years old. And improvisation is actually part of Persian traditional music. So you're expected actually to improvise. So you're encouraged to do that.
It's not like playing Beethoven where you got to hit the right notes at the right time at the right tempo.
No. It's totally opposite. So you learn actually to improvise from the early time when you're actually learning Persian.
And are there rules? I mean, especially with something like Santur, how much can you stretch out, or how much are you supposed to sort of follow a tradition?
So there are rules. So you have to follow the radif. Basically, that's the textbook of the Persian traditional music. You have to learn them, memorize a lot of riffs, and then the idea is that when you learn them, then you have to improvise and use them, and then try to make your own kind of music based on what you learned.
There's it's, if I were interviewing a non-Iranian, like somebody who grew up in Canada, and to a family that had been here for generations, it would be kind of surprising that he grew up in a musical family and he was really into music and he was playing music and he was writing his first song at 10, and then he went into engineering. It's not as much of a surprise for Iranians. We all sort of get it and go, of course, that's what any respectable kid would do. But tell me about that decision to go into engineering.
So the music, especially in Iran, you don't need to necessarily go to school. It's heart to heart. So you learn it from the masters, and I had access to that. I was learning. My father was there. I was learning some other instruments. And also, I was really good at school as well. So that path that just I was enjoying, and I was on the top of the class. So that part was also something that...
You were at the top of the class?
I was, yeah.
Where were you at the concours? I've understood that I have to ask this question of where you ranked in the concours.
Well, my ranking was actually not bad. It was 123 in the concours. In
the country?
Yes.
For which test did you have to take? The
math test. So I got accepted to, basically I could just go to any...
You were number 123 in the country.
Yes.
That's huge, right? That's really high.
It is, yes.
I would want to be in the top 10,000 maybe.
Yeah.
So you're a math genius is what you're saying.
It's not genius, but I was good. I was good at math, so I was good at school, and
you were into that. You wanted to go into engineering, or did it feel like I'm curious whether a guy like you, who's even in a musical family, if there was on some level some disheartening feeling of, I know I can't do this as a career. This is not possible as an Iranian in Iran to make a career being a musician. So I have to be an engineer. Even though I kind of like it, I do well in school, it wouldn't be my first choice. Was it that, or was it, I love engineering too, let me go do that?
I think it was just, especially in Iran, you are the result of a lot of circumstance that is happening in the society, and you're not that much open to choose or at what I want to do at that time. And I'm glad actually that happened. If I was, because it allowed me to come to Canada to do all these things. If I was doing music, maybe I couldn't actually immigrate, come here. So it helped me. And
how did it allow you to come to Canada?
I got a scholarship, so I was able to come to Canada to study basically engineering.
So you did your degree in Iran, and you did a master's in here then, in Canada.
Yes.
I was going to ask you what precipitated you leaving Iran in 2009. Was it always something that you intended to do? I've got to get out?
Absolutely, yeah, because I knew that I was picturing myself that I wanted to be outside Iran and explore what is happening in the world. And the path is basically you have to study hard to get scholarship. It's not easy, and that was one of the path. And I was in the right track because of the school and...
Number 132 in the country. Was it 132, 127? What was it?
123.
123. Sorry, I lowered you by 9 points. 132. 123 in the country. Yeah, and an electrical engineer. You're a control. You said a control engineer.
Yes.
I was talking to you earlier. What does that mean? You engineer control in people?
So electrical engineering has 4 fields. So control engineer was one of the subdirectory of electrical engineer. So basically, it was like controlling things. And I guess when I was a kid, I always liked these lights that you can actually turn and it changed the light. I remember I was like 5 or 6, and I was like, oh, I like to control things. So I think it came from that part.
So what was moving to Canada like for you?
It was, I think it was quite easy, and I loved it because I had a scholarship, and I came at the age of 23. Everything was very new, and I came by myself. I had no one here. I went to Montreal, and I studied my degree, and it was very fun.
Well, you came by yourself, and you had no one here, you say, but I'm guessing you probably did know once you get to Toronto, then there's a bunch of your cohorts from the same age group who also did engineering in Iran who've migrated to Canada. Like, did that happen for you? This is a particularly interesting place, Toronto, the Greater Toronto area, because there's people like my cousin, one of my cousins who's an engineer who went to Sharif, and all his buddies that he went to university with happened to live a street away from him in Toronto now, which is not something you would almost find in any sort of pattern of migration in other parts of the world. But it is true for Iranians in Toronto, and particularly for engineers who did schooling there. So I on that level, there's probably people here that you knew in Iran that you now have a community here with, right?
That's true. I was actually in Montreal, but the funny thing is that I came with a friend of mine, and we both get the same scholarship from the same professor, and then we were in the same chess club in Iran, in the same university. So I knew I had friends that, we actually came together, so it was just fun and easy.
I love how much of an academic nerd you are. You're 123 in the concours. You're a math genius. You're a chess player. I as well am a chess fan. So I'm not sure. Where did you rank with chess? Are you number 123 in the world at chess as well? Tell me about that first album you put out. So for a while, you've got this parallel life going in Canada, where you're an engineer and you're also doing your music. And when I first was introduced to you a few years ago, you were Sina the Santour guy. You were kind of you always had a modern twist on what you were doing, and you had other band members and things. You weren't this super hyper classical guy, but you weren't as well the electronic sort of trance oriented, dance oriented kind of musician that you are now. Tell me about that journey musically from over the last decade or so that you've been in Canada, how you've moved to where you are now.
Absolutely, that's true. So I did my first album in 2012, and that was just Santour, because the way I was playing, it was kind of like modern. It wasn't traditional. So, and then gradually I added different sound. And I remember first time I was at the artist residency at Banff Center for Performing Arts. And in my studio, I had only my Santour and a mic. And I remember that there was this guy next door, and he has a lot of gears, like the gears that I have right now. So I have a lot of pedals and things. And he was like, "Is that all you have?" He couldn't believe that I had only Santour with me. But in that residency, I met, there was this cellist there, and then there was another woman that was arranging things, and I started to arrange my song with cello, and we played it there, and that was the start. So I feel like, oh, actually, I can actually do that, and it's I'm still playing Santour, but the other color that I'm just adding, it just works perfectly. And I started to add different instruments to it. I added guitar, bass guitar, and drum, and then for a while I had my acoustic band before I moved to electronic.
You're doing more groove-oriented stuff now. When did that become something you were excited by?
I remember exactly when, because it was at my friend's birthday, and I was listening to this song. They were playing some DJ sets, and I was like, "Oh, this looks. I really like this song." And I know that the next day I started to see. Let me try to see if I can remake this one. we made the grooves, and I made my first electronic songs called Summer Days, and I played baglama and santur on it. Still, I had some traditional instruments on that. But I can say that the jumping point for me was the COVID. During the COVID time, it allowed me actually to learn about the electronic music, to
explore beats,
yeah. And then I remember that I booked my show after the COVID, the first one in February 2022, and I was like, let me try and make these songs, and if it didn't work, I will ask my bandmate to join me. I didn't tell them that I have a show. Let's see if it didn't work. Maybe I'll ask them, and we played the acoustic sets. But and luckily, it worked out very well.
Yeah, I think I was at that show. It's been a really cool journey. I don't see you, having seen you on stage a few times now, I don't see you play the santur as much now, right? In terms of what you're doing musically, what are the other instruments that you have? A series of oddly shaped and small sized guitar type instruments that I don't always know exactly what they are that you play. What are they, and where do your fingers most go these days?
So that's true. So I don't play santur any longer now, but I used to play oud when I was growing up, and I played sitar, Persian sitar as well. And so I figured that, if I want to do electronic music, I need some instrument that is not acoustic, because with the mic setup, it doesn't work that well. And I was like, all right, if I can find electronic oud, which that's what I have. I have a multi-oud, which is like a oud, but it's electronic with a pickup. It could just work perfectly because I can just play that easily. And I also picked up the ukulele. I bought one when I was living in Korea. So I bought a ukulele and I was playing like sitar, not like a ukulele. And then I figured out, actually, I can actually play ukulele like sitar, and then it has a pickup. So actually, I can just have this instrument and just play melodies. So
very cool.
Electronic setting, it would just work perfectly. So those are now my two instruments that I tour with mostly.
What? Sorry, when did you live in Korea?
I lived in Korea.
You just threw that in there. When you were living in Korea, when was that?
I lived in Korea for a year in 2000. I think it was 2015.
Wow.
Yes.
And how was that?
It was awesome. I loved that time. It was one of the
you
best
learned
times.
the ukulele when you were in
I picked up the ukulele. I bought it.
Not something that we identify with Korea necessarily. The ukulele. Yeah.
I was looking. I was like, I need to have an instrument, and I went to this huge music store in Seoul, and I just bought acoustic a tenor ukulele, and I was just like trying to play.
It's interesting. Like if I'm thinking about the oud or the ukulele, certainly, it's an entirely different instrument from the santur. I mean, the santur, you're playing with mallets in your hand. These are guitar, like I say, I keep calling them guitar type instruments. It's probably not the right, but that's what the way I reference it. Do you think as a musician your abilities transfer from instrument to instrument, or were they two completely different experiences in terms of learning to play these different instruments?
No, I don't think they are two different. Obviously, I'm more comfortable in santur, but I've been playing oud and sitar for a while now, that I can transfer things with those two instruments too. So that's why I never said that I'm just a santur player. I'm an improviser. So, and then I believe you're limited by the techniques in any instruments that you pick up, because you have the knowledge, you have the melodies in your mind. So if you can actually learn the techniques, so you can transfer whatever you have in your mind. So I think those instruments works too.
So Cena, I've been looking forward to talking to you about this, because you made a big decision this year in February, and again, well, I was going to say as an Iranian, but it's not even as an Iranian. When you have a career, a stable career, as you've had as an engineer, and it's something you excel at, as you say, it's a big decision to decide to step away from that career and focus entirely on music. And if you'll forgive me, you're not 19 anymore too. It's a little bit more, I don't know about easier, but it's a little bit more less risky, it feels, when you're like a teenager or something like that. I'm going to try music. Somebody in their 30s now is deciding, okay, I'm going to carve this new path and walk away from another safety net, which is your engineering. Tell me about that decision.
So I always wanted to, basically, for a long time, that I knew that eventually I will move to music. That's where my passion is in and where I'm good at. And then I built the whole thing I built that point that allows me actually to do the switch.
Meaning what? You saved a bunch of money?
No, not at all.
What is building?
No. Making the fan base, making the music, and having audience that they wanted to come to listen to you. Because I always thought that as a musician, you have to rely on your own music, not on anybody else. So I always wanted my career to be in a way that people want to come to my shows for themselves, to get something out of that shows. And so I put a lot of music, and then I was waiting for the moments that it connects with people that allowed me to actually do the switch. And when I did, actually, I had a concert in Toronto, and it was a sold-out concert. 400 people came, and I was like, this is a right time to do this switch. And at that time, the Breath of Life was not viral yet. So, and then it happened later on. But I built the whole thing, and I think in February that was the right moment.
Was it scary?
It was, but at the time, I was thinking it's all about the mindset. I believe that if you just think it's scary, it would never happen. And I was trying to picture how would it be if it just worked perfectly. I was trying to imagine in my head that how beautiful it would be if I can actually think about just what I want to do, like what experience I want to do and have, and it worked just so perfectly. I recently had a show in San Francisco. It was sold out. So things are going really well, and I'm really glad that
But it's a different kind of energy. It's you have to hustle as an artist. I mean, not that you don't have to as an engineer, but you don't sort of have that regularity or that regular paycheck. It's a whole different paradigm, right?
No. So for me, luckily, it's not like that. So I'm much more comfortable right now from the music than I was at the engineering part. So for my case, luckily, it's just working very nicely for me. And so there's no hustle. But I knew that even if there was a hustle, so maybe I have to work a little bit harder for a while and then cut from some things. So I wasn't really 100% comfortable financially to do this switch, but I knew that I'm the right way, I'm in the right path, and it would just work.
What did your dad say?
My dad always supported it. Yeah.
He was okay with it?
Absolutely.
He didn't say, seriously? You're 123 in the concours.
Yeah, no, my mom was a big supporter because she said, she actually, her word was very nice, that she said, so, at the end of the day, even if things doesn't work out, you're an engineer with 10 years of experience overseas. So,
Right. You can easily go back.
Absolutely. And I think that any move that you do afterwards, you're going towards something better. It's not out of desperation, so you're doing something because you respect yourself, you want to do something better, so good things will happen.
If nothing works, there's always Korea. You
Absolutely.
can go back to Korea, your go-to place. Your shows are, I feel like they're an interesting hybrid between a live rock concert or that we kind of thing we'd be used to seeing and a DJ set where it's more of an experience and less about what's happening on stage and more about the vibe and feeling and people dancing and sort of having a good time. That's got to be conscious. I mean, you're carving something out that seems to be a hybrid of those two experiences. Talk to me about that.
Absolutely. So I always knew that I wanted to play live. So that was my thing. I wanted to be able to improvise and play live. And even the first show that I did my electronic music. I knew that if I could get to a point that I can improvise, that would work. That I was really confident about that part. And so,
what do you mean if you can get to a point that you can improvise?
So if I can have a bed track of the electronic music that, I get to the point that I can just improvise on that track. So that will work because I knew that, improvisation, I could just transfer my feeling and that will connect with the audience. So and then now I'm trying is a process that I'm trying to make it toward the electronic music concerts with that same energy, but still I wanted to have the live part that I can just compose live on the stage and just enjoy and just create in the moment.
I almost feel like people don't come like the way you would go to a Coldplay concert to see your favorite songs played. People don't come with that agenda to your show necessarily. They're coming to an experience, it feels like.
I like that one. Actually, people are coming now for both of them. Now their songs are out, so a lot of people come to hear Birth of Life. Basically, they wanted to experience that energy because
Right.
and the experience of the live concerts. Because for me, it's really important what experience I'm creating for people. I don't want to just have a concert. I just want to give them experience. And this experience of all people together, the energy that they have, it just when people are dancing, it just gives a very good energy to everybody that comes to that show, and they know that they're gonna go home with an elevated state, and so that's something that I'm building, so that people know that if they come, that's what they.
It's
get.
fun watching you on stage because you have this kind of little shy grin on your face, and you're just kind of grooving along. Sometimes I almost feel like you go into a bit of a trance. You're enjoying the music that you're creating as you're creating it for people who are dancing to it. Tell me about your mindset during the show, if you could get into that headspace.
Absolutely. That's actually my goal, to be able to maximize that part, that I can just let everything go and just be fully in the moments. And that happened for the track Birth of Life in that show that you were the first time that I played it. It was such a beautiful energy in the room.
Yeah.
I improvised that piece there on the stage. And that recording is now the viral track because, I was full in the moment and it was captured and I was feeling really good. And when that happens, it's just beautiful things happens in the moment. And that's something that I wanted to go watch. I want to go out to watch an artist and just see that person really vulnerable and right on the stage and creating something beautiful. Isn't it just beautiful to
It is, but it's a
part?
particular kind of energy. You don't jump around the stage. I mean, you do some jumping, but it's not erratic. You're a very calm personality. This is the only version of you I've known. The version that's here right now, off camera, off of an interview, at your home, at a concert, whatever. You just like you seem a very calm personality, and that's what we see on stage too. It's almost like. Do you practice meditation, or is the experience of performing almost meditative for you?
Absolutely. I do practice meditation a lot because I think in order to go to that state, you have to be in a place that can just bring that out and put it on the stage and put it in your instruments. So if your mind is just going all over the place, if you're distracted, so definitely you wouldn't personally enjoy what you're doing on the stage. So it's really important to work on that part, that when you go on stage, you are just full.
And how do you work on that?
I do a lot of, I wake up really early and I have my routines and I do a lot of meditation.
When do you wake up?
5 a.m.
Every day?
Every day.
You wake up at 5 a.m. every day?
I wake up every day at 5 a.m.
When do you go to bed?
At 9:30, 10.
The rock and roll star, 9:30 p.m. in bed.
Yeah, I know it would be hard for my career as a musician, so that's why.
Don't let that get out. Don't let people know that.
Yeah,
that's amazing. So you don't feel like you're missing anything by going to bed at 9:30 p.m.
No, absolutely. You become more selective. You choose what you want to do, and then there's some nights that I want to go out and check things. You definitely do that, but the majority of time, that's what I.
So when you're playing a gig, it's literally past your bedtime.
That is true. But, I like to be in control, to be able to do my shows, to dictate what I want at what time I want just to play. So luckily now I can control that for now, but we'll see.
So what do you do when you wake up at 5 a.m.? What's the first thing you do?
So I'll do some meditations, journaling, and then I'll go to do my workout. I'll go out to a place that I go, and then I'll do my morning walk. And that's always the routine.
You work out, then walk.
Yes, work out, breakfast, and then walk.
All right. So and then it's still 7:30 or 8 p.m. and you have the whole day ahead of you.
Yes, you see the sunrise when you're walking, and then
That's amazing. I love that. I love that you do that. And being a full-time musician hasn't changed that.
it actually it made it easier because now I know that when I'm waking up at 5, I don't have to go to work. I'm just waking up because I want to, because I need more time to do the music.
Mm-hmm.
If I need to go to engineering, if I need to go to a job, I think that maybe it wouldn't work out because now I'm waking up because there is a time limit. Now I don't have a time limit, and I can just walk for 2 hours if I want to.
So if you were out late with friends
Yeah.
and you come home at 2 in the morning or 1 in the morning, do you still get up at 5?
No, you have to sleep is very important for your body. So I will sleep more if I'm just.
I see.
Yeah.
So you say you don't actually always get up at 5.
No.
That's your aspiration is to get up at 5.
Absolutely.
But you have to sleep early to
Yes.
make that happen.
That's
All
true.
right.
Yeah.
So you're a bit cheating a little bit. So you don't actually get up at 5 every day.
No, of course. You know, it's just your body needs.
How
to
much of
rest.
this is a real? How honest are you being in this interview? How many days a week do you get up at 5 a.m.?
7 days a week. If I go out, I will not. But I'm not going out.
You don't
so
ever go out.
Rarely
Ah.
at night. But the times that I go out, I just wake up later.
You're going to be out next week.
Yes.
Because you have in Toronto next week, for those listening in the Greater Toronto Area, sometimes I feel bad that we're so Toronto-centric with this program because most of our audience is not in Toronto, but they're around the world. But for those who are in Toronto, you're doing this gig, this show that is in conjunction with this Van Gogh immersive experience. Anybody
Yes.
who's seen it, been to it, as I have, it's a spectacular, or even seen videos of it. It's this amazing experience where you walk into these galleries, these rooms, and there's Van Gogh projected all over, and there's music and atmosphere. You're somehow doing something in conjunction with that. Tell us what it is.
That's true. It's a very unique production. I'm very excited about that. And the idea was that I wanted to do a concert in a silent disco format where you have headphones, and then everybody has headphones, and the sounds actually will go there. And basically the reason was that I wanted to bring the santur back to my sets because that's something that I played better. I play handpan too. So those acoustic instruments, I wanted to explore that. And I came up with the idea of just putting it in and then I came up to the idea of just doing it at Van Gogh exhibition. And everything worked out. So now in this show, there will be Van Gogh exhibitions running, and then I'll make the music based on the paintings right live there with santur and handpan. So
People will be wearing headphones.
Yes.
And they'll be walking through the immersive experience or sitting or whatever, and you'll be in the room playing live, and we'll be listening to you on our headphones.
That is correct. Yes, that would be one part of it. On the second part, I'll play my songs, my electronic songs, audio works.
And are you going to improvise, or do you have pieces that you've written for these Van Gogh images?
I will improvise. I will make music right
Wow.
there. Yes.
It's a very cool idea.
Thank you. Yeah, this is just another thing that I think it's fun to create different experience for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that would be, it's a very unique thing because, if you look at it, there's only one place in Canada that you can have Van Gogh immersive experience. There's 5 in North America. So it's a very unique experience.
Yeah.
And I love to be able to do that and just play music on that exhibitions for people to just come and experience. And then what we did, we actually made it all age. So now people from 7, they can come because they can't come to a normal concert. So
right, because you like to play at clubs, which because people can move. You don't want to be in a theater where everybody's sitting the whole time.
That is true.
But then kids can't come. Well, this is going to be interesting.
Yes.
The Van Gogh. Good for you, man. Listen, it's such a pleasure to finally have you here, and I'm so happy for you with your new release today. The video, by the way, is beautiful. It looks like there's images from Tehran, but it can't be Tehran, right?
It is from
It is Tehran.
Yes.
How did you get those images?
So because the name is Tehran, so I have to have some footage from Tehran. So I worked with this film editor and filmmaker from Tehran that just edited some of the footage.
Like the one when shot it themselves?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So it's not like the series Tehran that's shot in Greece.
No.
It's actually
it's actual footage.
it's a
of
beautiful
Tehran.
video,
Yeah.
and it's a beautiful song.
Thank you.
That said, I asked you if you would play something for us in the studio, and I love this because this is you living up to your moniker as the improviser, your self-proclaimed identity as the improviser. You said you're going to play something that you made up yesterday.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us what you're going to play for us.
So the song is called 7 Ponds, and there was this. I was in my morning run. I go to this
7 ponds, like little lakes, little
Yes,
ponds. Okay.
That's true. So it resonates something from when I was a kid. I don't know. It was a Darban or Darake. There was a place called in Farsi called Haft Hoz, and I remember that clearly. It was in that
7 pools.
Yes,
So, yeah.
7 pools. It was really beautiful. You could see the river and the 7 ponds. And then the place that I go for a meditation and a walk, it has this kind of 7 ponds. And I was like, oh, that could be a good song title. And then I came home, I was just working on something, and then the idea of this song came that I just made yesterday. I called it out that would be a perfect name for it. And the reason I want to play it is because it's just it's aligned with all the other songs that I was composing. I feel like, your music should be able to elevate people's states. There are a lot of sad songs these days. So if I can actually make things that change their mood, I win. So, and then like if I play them, it would be a therapy for myself too. It's the positive songs I like to play, and then you can actually add something to people's life. And
you're gonna, I see you got the ukulele. That's what you're gonna play in this?
Yes.
All right. And I'll assume some of this is gonna be improvisation. Improvisation.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Amazing. Let's do it. Sina Bathaie live in the Roqe Studio. Get set up here, performing a piece that he wrote yesterday. Given the opportunity to play the song that he released today, Tehran, he's playing something that he improvised on yesterday. I love that. A piece called 7 Pawns. All right, I think Sina's set up. Take it away. All right. Nicely done. Live in the Roqe Studio, that's Sina Bathaie performing a piece called Seven Pawns that he just actually created yesterday. This is less than 24 hours old, folks. Nicely done.
Thank you very much.
How did you feel?
Amazing to play live for the first time. Premiered at Roqe.
You premiered it, and how was your improvisation?
I like it.
I don't know how much of that was improvisation. It wasn't, so only you know.
All of it was improvisations, and no, I love it. I love this piece. I know that I'll play it a lot.
It's a really nice piece. It's a really nice piece. It's been such a pleasure to have you here, man. Thank you. Congratulations on the new song Tehran. Congratulations on Seven Pawns, on your Van Gogh gig next week, and on all things going well for you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Such a pleasure. Thank you. Sina Bathaie, live here in the Roqe Studio. Do catch him if you're in the Greater Toronto area. Get tickets for his gig next week, which is a fusion of his concert with the Van Gogh immersive exhibition. I don't think you want to miss this. Where can people get tickets? Go to your website?
Yes.
Which is what?
SinaBathaie.com.
SinaBathaie.com. We'll put a link to that at our description underneath this episode as well. Thanks again, Sina. This is full time for Roqe for today. For all things Roqe related, roqemedia.com is where to find us. That's also where you can support us by pressing the Support Us button and becoming a Roqe member on Patreon. Thanks to the amazing team who put this show together. Savvy Roham, Smart Pegah, Methodical Kaver, Talented Anahita, Bearded Omid, and Super Parisa. Thank you to all of you out there for supporting us and sharing our content. Please do subscribe if you haven't done so already on any or all of our platforms. Find me on Instagram at Jian Gomeshi. Find Roqe on Instagram at Roqe Media. Not to mention Twitter and Telegram and LinkedIn and everywhere else. In the meantime, as ever, Mizun Bashin.